Hello everyone! I haven't made a video in a while because my computer died on me and I had to buy a new one. By the way, big shout outs to everyone who donated, bought merch, or became a patron to help me out with that. You the best. But now I've got a computer, so let's make a video about racism. Hi, I'm T1J.
Follow me.
By the way, the video file for my normal intro is on my other hard drive, which doesn't fit into my computer right now. I'll try to get it soon, or maybe I'll make another one. I should really back up my files, huh? So anyway, if I had to guess, I would say that nobody thinks they're racist. Even people who are unambiguously racist.
Oh, racist. Give me a break.
Because of this, it's always difficult to point out that someone has said or done something racist. Because the response to such an accusation is one of two extremes: exaggerated guilt or hyper defensiveness, especially if we're talking about white people. This, I believe, is because a lot of people, especially white people, seem to think that human beings can be cleanly separated into groups of racist and not racist. And not racist people are apparently incapable of racism, or at least apparently they should be. So when they're accused of being racist, there must be some kind of mistake. On one extreme, you have people accusing you of race baiting or misusing the word racist. The SJWs call everything racist, so now the word racist has lost all meaning. Except, of course, when someone is racist to white people. Or alternatively, the white guilt kicks in and they have a crisis of conscience. Am I racist? I can't be racist. I give Jamal a high five every morning at work. Is that racist? Is his name really Jamal, or did I just make that up because he's black? Now, some things are obvious examples of racism that I assume even the most shitlordish among you could agree is pretty bad. Like threatening to call ICE on random people just because they were speaking Spanish and doing this on camera, or calling a black person the N-word while your company's name and phone number is fully displayed on camera. I really feel like the racists of the world need to rewrite their textbook if "don't say racist shit on camera" in 2018 isn't written in bold print on the first page. Some forms of racism, however, are more subtle, and if you're not a part of a marginalized group, they may be less obvious to you. Like commenting on how a black person speaks so well.
He speaks so well. Like that's a compliment. Speak so well is not a compliment, okay?
Or asking an Asian American where they are really from.
But sometimes, even though the intent is good, it still comes off culturally insensitive, right?
Now, many of you may hear those examples and feel a little puzzled. In fact, I've used these same examples in other videos, and I've gotten many messages and emails. Some of them were honest confusion, like, "I just don't really understand how that's racist. Can you explain?" And some of them were just resentful douchebaggery. Like, "You just call everything racist.
The SJWs love being victims. The word has lost all meaning. This is why everyone hates the left."
But I think this sort of exemplifies the lack of perspective a lot of people have. Now, if any honest person takes like 12 seconds to think about it, it should be pretty obvious why treating someone like an outsider to your country or implying lower standards because of their race is insensitive. But even acknowledging that, you still get people that say things like, "Well, yeah, but is it racist?" Racist is such a strong word. If you misuse it, it loses its impact. There was an illuminating segment from an April episode of CNN Tonight with Don Lemon, where Lemon speaks with political commentators Angela Rye, Amanda Carpenter, and Scott Jennings. Carpenter and Jennings both admitted that Trump routinely expresses bigoted and racially insensitive sentiments, but neither would go so far as to call him racist. And in fact, they essentially admonished Don and Angela against using the word race.
I don't believe the man is a racist. I believe the man has said insensitive things about race. I think to label someone a racist in this country is one of the harshest things you can say. And I do not personally want to label
when it's
Donald
true,
Trump.
Scott?
This is enlightening, as it shows that for some people, being called racist is worse than actually being racist. And I think that's at least in part why there's been this huge pushback to the racist label and the rise of this idea that the left just calls everything racist. I've said before that I think this whole anti-PC free speech movement has been hijacked by people who just want to say and do awful and bigoted stupid shit without any consequences. And I think this is no different because ironically, trying to prevent us from calling obviously racist shit racist is far more likely to render the word meaningless than overuse of it is. Now, of course, Donald Trump is very good at giving himself and his supporters deniability. I've talked about this before. If Trump was, for example, openly a neo-Nazi, maybe his apologists would back off a little bit. Maybe he wouldn't even be the president. Right? So you might argue that being overtly racist is worse than being subtly racist, or that actively disparaging a group of people is worse than well-meaning insensitivity. And you might be right in some cases, but the thing I want you to internalize is that it's all still racism. Racism is not a binary. You can't really separate people or behaviors into distinct categories of obviously racist and obviously not racist. I mean, clearly calling someone the N-word right before you deny them a bank loan is definitely worse than touching someone's hair without their permission. By the way, white girls, stop touching people's hair. That's so weird. But both of those are things that contribute to and reinforce marginalization and undermining of people of color. To different degrees, obviously, but they both do it. I'm starting to think that for us to move forward on this issue, we have to start calling things what they are. If someone gets slashed across the stomach with a machete, you might say, dude, you're bleeding. If someone cuts the tip of their finger chopping onions, like I did a couple days ago, it would still be correct to say, dude, you're bleeding. We don't use euphemisms just because it's a lesser degree. We don't say, yo, man, your finger's dripping the red stuff, bro. So maybe if we stop tiptoeing around these situations with terms like racially charged, controversial, or racially insensitive, and just started calling racist shit racist, maybe people would start to take these issues more seriously. Now, I understand people don't like to be called racist, especially white people. They say that racist is the N-word for white people, which I don't want to get into how obnoxious that is, but I understand what they're getting at. But also, people don't like to be the target of racism, even casual racism. And I think you should care about that more. I think one problem is that too many people use racist as a noun instead of an adjective. Hey, that's a reference to the title of the video. What do you know? Now, obviously, I understand that grammatically, you can correctly use the word racist as a noun. In fact, I did this myself not too long ago. In fact, I think one good definition of a racist is a person who consistently does and says racist shit. So hopefully my subscribers are roasting all you people in the comments who did not watch the video. But a racist, as in a person who believes in the superiority of their own race, or that certain groups are inferior to other groups just by virtue of them being part of a certain race. I think that's a thing that's either very uncommon in developed society or so socially unacceptable that only these weirdos are brave enough to talk about it. But some people seem to think that that's the only kind of racism there is. But here's the thing that's going to make a lot of y'all uncomfortable. Racist behavior can be committed by a person who is not a racist. And in fact, I'd wager that most racist behavior is. The implicit bias that causes people to disproportionately mistrust, fear, disrespect, and marginalize people of color is probably not usually the result of a conscious feeling of racial superiority. But these behaviors nevertheless contribute to the perpetuation of white supremacy. Sometimes these acts are conscious assholery, and sometimes they're ignorant mistakes. And I'm not arguing for the diminishing of the word racist, nor am I arguing that intent doesn't matter. But when you're participating in behaviors that actively harm people, you should own up to that, whether you meant that harm or not. The key thing here is this is not just edgy jerks or minor faux pas. These are actions that contribute to racial oppression by marginalizing specific groups of people. And I know many of you won't be convinced. There's this idea that people all of a sudden got super sensitive. You can't say anything anymore without someone calling you racist. Everyone's so PC. Why don't you focus on real problems? And I think this further indicates the lack of perspective. It doesn't seem like much to a non-Asian person's perspective to ask them where they're really from. But when that person, and basically every other Asian person in the country has to hear that over and over again, it begins to have an impact. And these kinds of things have always been a problem. The difference now is not that people are all of a sudden more sensitive, but that we're living in an era where regular people of many different backgrounds have more of an opportunity to speak about their experiences than they ever have. POC voices have historically been marginalized and silenced, so of course we haven't heard their point of view as often. Every now and then you hear people say something like, I want to go back to the time before everyone was so sensitive and PC. And essentially what this means is, I want to go back to the time when straight white men can say and do whatever they wanted without any consequences. You're essentially romanticizing an age of unbridled white supremacy. Incidentally, it should be no surprise to you how often actual white supremacists say shit like that. Now look, of course, sometimes people go too far. Whether they are young, inexperienced people on social media trying to sort out who they are and what they believe, or maybe they're just trolls whose sole purpose is to antagonize people. Sometimes stuff that isn't racist gets called racist. It happens. In my experience though, whenever I see someone complaining about an accusation of racism, it is almost always something that is actually racist, but the person just lacks the perspective to understand why. And I think this has a lot to do with this fictional racism binary a lot of people have internalized. They think to themselves, I'm not racist, so the thing that I did must not be racist. In actuality, and this is probably where I'm gonna lose some people, it is almost inevitable for white people to have contributed to the marginalization of people of color, often through racist behavior. And the same goes for any other example of group dynamics where there's a power disparity. As a straight man, I have definitely said and done sexist and homophobic shit, even though I am not and never have been a sexist or a homophobe. This is due to a natural lack of experience and perspective. It doesn't automatically make you a terrible person, so stop being so fucking defensive. I'm only gonna call you an asshole if you refuse to acknowledge these social disparities and refuse to grow or try to be a thoughtful person. But at the same time, I think I'm done sugarcoating the language we use when we talk about racism. Not because I'm trying to be a dick, but because I don't think that people will fully understand until we start calling things what they really are. That's just me though. What do you think? Thank you for watching my video. Again, sorry for the long wait. Shout outs to all of the new subscribers. There are a lot of new ones. I hope you enjoy your stay. If you'd like to support this channel and help it become bigger and better, becoming a patron is the absolute best way to do that. So please check out patreon.com/theonejanitor. Even $1 a month goes a very long way. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.